to stop me, and it's a very small group, so it's a very doable thing, okay? And those of you who have seen my videos or were there 2 days ago, it's interactive, I make it interactive, so I've done, I'm a sales guy all my life, but I did a lot of corporate training, executive corporate training, and even if I want to do a monologue, it turns into a conversation, okay, which is a good thing. So, we always need, if there is a presentation, we need a title, okay, so that's Ancient Indian Medical Sciences, 3 case studies, something for you to grab onto, okay, that's what he's going to talk about. All right, and quickly, that Institute of Advanced Sciences, this is a very small research-based group of people, okay. I mean, we still do our daily job, or somehow we use our own resources to support us, and we do original research, okay. Right from medical side of things like botulinum, the Botox, and if you know, the Botox people only know for one reason, but it has many other medicinal applications. It's a very deadly poison, has many applications if you know what to do with it, just like mercury and mercury oxide type of thing. And then we also have a group on the Indic side, Indic studies in general, okay? So like effects of sound, vibrations and whatnot, and the kind of research that I do. So it's in Dartmouth, just 1 hour south of Boston. I'm based in Atlanta. So many times when people who go to Boston, they just text me, ping me, hey, can we meet today? And so I'm not physically there. All right, so as I mentioned, prevention, cure, and patient management. Sort of, I thought I'll pick 3 different areas of medical science, or what we are interested in. So 3 aspects. First one is on smallpox inoculation, okay, and in the bracket I have parenthesis, I have said Banaras Brahmins. You'll see what is the connection of Banaras Brahmins to smallpox inoculation. Okay, anyone here who doesn't know what smallpox is? Because it's been eradicated now for a long time, okay, so many people may not even know. Okay, it's a very deadly kind of epidemic that used to happen everywhere, and literally, I'll show the pictures, disfigures people. The next one is Rhinoplasty, okay, the nose operation or fixing of a nose, so not the transplant. Someone asked me, is there a transplant we're going to discuss? Not the transplant, but giving somebody a nose who has lost his or her nose, okay. And then as a keywords, if you want to call it, in the bracket, parenthesis, I have written Indian flap, Maharashtrian potter, and sage Sushruta. Okay. So we'll see what that connection is. And the third one is Kumbhakarna. Anyone here who has not heard about Kumbhakarna? Everyone knows Kumbhakarna, has heard about Kumbhakarna? Kumbhakarna, Ramayana, yeah? The big guy, yeah? Okay. So we are going to talk about Kumbhakarna and something, if you have heard, if not, we will know what it is. KLS syndrome stands for Kleine-Levine syndrome. Okay. So what kind of framework do we use? So for example, when we read our references, I call it, and this is a term given by Raju Malhotraji, those of you who know the name, and that's a very good term. We don't call it scriptures. We should not call it scriptures. We should not call it mythology. If you don't remember this, that's fine. But next time we are talking about the ancient Indian narratives, okay, don't call it mythology. Okay, there may be things which are wrong, which are false, which may not be correct in it, but it's not mythology. If you say mythology, will you do this? Promise me. You will slowly slap yourself. Okay, just don't call it. I mean, if you can just do this one thing, it can go a long way. Okay. Now, if you are not convinced, start reading. Okay, if you still think it's mythology. So what kind of framework we need? The reason I mentioned that is you read something and I say, okay, but do I trust it? Do I believe it? Is this true? It appears exaggerated, I mean, how do I make sense that this is true? What our Shastras are telling us, okay, so there are Shad Darshanas, these different darshanas literally seeing how to understand the things in the world. They are saying different ways, and they never say you read something or some Swamiji says something to you and you say, okay, therefore it is true, I should not question it. No. They say you have to question it. I mean, not in an argumentative fashion, in a very logical fashion. So for example, what is that vertical axis I'm showing is the axis of conviction. You know, you cannot just read something, or even without reading something, this doesn't make sense, or this is all not true. You haven't read it. Okay, so you have to have a conviction, why you are saying something. That has this extra axis of a shraddha, which is a reverence, faith, and then there is a sakshatkar. So actually you have heard something, somebody tells you Seattle is beautiful, but that's all you have heard. Then you visit Seattle, you look at the green, whatever, all these things, and you can make your mind. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but now you have seen it. The second axis is the Vyapti Jnana, or the contextual knowledge. If you don't have a contextual knowledge, and if you read some description, it appears exaggerated, you are going to reach a wrong conclusion. When something is given in a poetic form, there are embellishments. Okay, we use the metaphor all the time. Oh, he runs like a tiger. Immediately we don't make a mistake of thinking he is a tiger. But when we read a poetry or Adi Kavya or something, Mahabharata, we suddenly think, oh, how can the birds talk? Okay. So that we need a contextual knowledge. And this is from Srimad Bhagavad Puran, Srimad Bhagavatam. Shruti Pratyaksham Aitiyam Anumanam Chatushtayam. It says, unless you make a quadrangulation, okay, 4-point inspection you can call it, and bring them together, you should not take something as true. They all have to match. And what are those 4? Shruti, that is like you read somewhere, like in the Vedas or Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, so whatever ancient narrative. Then Pratyaksha, you should be able to find out, how can I verify this? Is there evidence for it? Then Aitiya, which means the contextual knowledge, other people's experiences. Suppose we are talking about yoga, and if you do a meditation, what kind of different things happen to you? Okay, you just sit for 10 minutes and say, nothing happened to me. Well, yeah, that's the right thing to, if you sit first time for the 10 minutes and you start levitating, something is wrong with you. Nothing wrong with the yoga, right? So, Aitiya is we say history, like Aitiya, heard. There is somebody that we heard. But it heard in the sense what? Other people's experience of experts, and so on. And then the last one there, we have to bring it together in terms of drawing an inference, a logical conclusion in the context of this background knowledge, okay? So we have to do this quadrangulation before we accept something. And then I'll go skip fast through that. The knowledge, the jnana, vijnana, realized knowledge. There's a difference between jnana versus vijnana. Realized knowledge, which is what? Through pratyaksha, through anuman, and so on. So this is the framework, the reason I'm showing it, just to give you some background. But this is the framework I'm using for my 4th book. So I have written already 3 books. The one I'm writing is the history of Hindu civilization, and I'm using this framework to use it, because the first I'll show you the framework I used for the previous one, and then I started getting, but you know what, you first take some initiation from a guru and all this, and bhakti is different, you don't understand. I said, this is from a bhakti literature, this is from Srimad Bhagavad Puran. It insists that unless you have a quadrangulation, you cannot accept it. Okay? It says pramaneshu anavasthana vikalpat savirajyate. If you don't do this quadrangulation, it will definitely will lead to confusion. If you just rely on one of the 4, it will lead to confusion. Okay? And mahad vimrutyam, there is just so much that is worthy of investigation. If we think everything has been already done, all that we have to do is read somewhere. That's not what Srimad Bhagavatam is saying. There's so much that is worthy of investigation. This is the infinite search. Like in science, we say ultimate ignorance is required for a progress of science. Okay? So this is the methodology, quickly, so my previous 3 books, that's what I use here. Again, what is this? Those of you with some science background or even otherwise, any theory, not about our Indic studies, Mahabharata, Ramayana. We have a problem. To solve the problem, we propose a solution. Think of Einstein, Newton, and all those. We propose a solution, then we find some evidence. Okay, so here, then we objectively test it and we draw the inference. We do this in the context of a background knowledge, depending on what the problem is, what the theory is. And here is what I just told you. So, for example, when we read something here and we understand the meaning, that is here, padajnana. We understand the meaning. But that is not the end of it. Somebody says Kumbhakarna was 17 feet tall. You read it somewhere. Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. I mean, that's how people talk. No, 17 feet. You should sort of say 17 feet. Interesting, right? And then start becoming curious about it. there is a long journey from there, from say this Padadnya here. You have to go Padartha Smaran Shabda Bodh, Sadrisha Jnana, Atiresha Vakya Smaranam. I mean, you have to go through this route all the way to this Pratyaksha Jnana. And then you are convinced. So I told you there are like a 4 points quadrangulation. I'm telling here there are around 11 steps that you get to final conviction. That makes sense. And that takes a lot of hard work. Just reading is not going to do it, right? Just reading a sentence. Okay, so now what happens, and I mentioned that the other day. So I'm studying this for 20, 30 years, and by luck, I would say, Daivam Chevatra Panchamam, by luck, I could make some original contribution. So when people become aware, they get very excited, they want to do the same thing, says, Nilesh, tell me some problem that I can also work on, and that's all very good. What many times they don't realize is that they think it's a plug and play. So like, give a problem and then now tell me which, how many of you watch Simpsons? Yeah. So like, Bart wants to cook something in the kitchen. He says, Mom, what can I do? And says, make a cranberry sauce. Okay, where are cranberries? Okay, get the can. How do I open it? Now what do I do? That's how people think. It's like the next step you ask. If they are going to ask me all those steps, there is no point they doing original research. This is a path where no one has gone before. We can match, we can do the coaching and whatnot. So I'm just showing you, so how do you get there? So you have a problem. This is an area where no man has gone before. Otherwise, it's not a revolutionary work. It's just repeating somebody's work, right? Or just doing it. So usually what happens is, you take a typical problem. I'm just giving you as how my journey was. And when I was doing this, there was no problem per se, other than somebody told me when I was young, oh, everything is there in our Vedas. And I was in the search, where is that? Let me find out, So my beginning was with the Bhagavad Gita, just by coincidence, like my mom said, okay, start reading this, something like this. But then, then I went to this, some of you, who know Santa Eknath, Maharashtrian saint, Vinoba, at some point I come across Vinoba. Then, and essentially my style is like, if I get something, I'll read it. So I was 6th grade when I read the whole Eknath Bhagavad. I'm not claiming I understood it then or even now. But I read it. I mean, so, and it was very tiring if you have seen it this big. But I said, the person bothered to write this big. What is my problem? I have to just read it, right? But that is our problem in these days, right? You see that people are very, very much against reading, let's say. Jnaneshwars, I'm just going to go quickly through this. Now, this one I was doing in certain context, like one thing led to another. Like, for example, when I got into philosophy of science, like early 90s. So I started reading Popper, Hume, Kant, Descartes and all that. University of California, I spent, I was in Alberta, Canada, but I spent 3 summers there, taking courses. Kuhn, if you have heard that name, philosopher of science, like, I read it and I said, he's totally useless, from Harvard, okay? Absolutely rubbish what he has written. So I also said, okay, not to read. So this is a suggestion for you. You can still read him, but read him and discard everything he says, okay? Utter nonsense. So you have to, what happens, you have to be interested, curious in general, you kind of go through all of this. Now, this is not necessarily thinking of solving any specific problem. What happens, when you come across a problem, all of this become useful. Okay, you say, I read something there, and is it possible that it could be this, and so on, okay? So this wasn't meant to impress you, like how much I have read, but just to tell you, like even to solve a simple problem, you need information from so many other sources. It's not a plug and play, okay? So you have to be ready for that long ride with no guarantee of a success. So this is a quote from Bhartuhari, Prajna Vivekam Labate Hinna Agama Darshane. How do you get intellect and how do you develop wisdom or common sense? It is through multidisciplinary reading, okay, of different subjects. All right, this summarizes my work on one slide very well. So what you see today is, think of us, 21st century. Anyone wants to guess what is 0? BC AD, interface, okay? BC AD or CE and BCE. And you go backwards, like notice the negative number. So 5K, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, negative, going back in the past, after 0. So when it says 5K, that means what? 7,000 years ago. 2,000 our years, 2,000 plus 7,000, okay? So what I did, This was my first work I published in 2011. I looked at every single astronomy reference from Mahabharata, used that framework that I showed you, and arrived at 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war and dates for the specific events. So that's what, more than 7,500 years ago. Ramayana, I did the same thing. Valmiki Ramayana, more than 600 references. Again, used the same framework, tested every single reference, and it took me to 12,209 BCE as the year of Ramayana, the Ram-Ravan Yuddha, which is, how long ago is that? More than 14,000 years ago. Okay. And then just very recently, when I say recently, 2016, late 2016, somebody said, okay, now how about Rigveda? Can you do it? So because I had done astronomy, I started doing Rigveda reading. And Rigveda has astronomy references, but there is nothing, at least I didn't find anything that allows me to say, okay, this particular date. It didn't allow me. So then I started looking at many other disciplines like hydrology, geology, and genealogies of the sages and the kings and so on. And what I could do is this. So there's not like an exact one date. But also, Rigveda, if you think it's all 10 mandalas are written one time, no, they are not. The composed, whatever you want to call it, they are not. They have different layers of it. So wisdom, when we say, well, they are apaurushya, they are always there. Do you know what it means? I mean, Vinobaji gives a very good definition. It is the eternality of a niti shastra. That niti, the moral codes, certain things just given, be truthful. Okay, don't create unnecessary violence. I mean, those are the basic tenets. They are always there, doesn't matter when, where. So that is the apaurushya part. But in terms of a specific description, just like if we have to do this discussion here, some things about today, 21st century, the phone, the references to the technology will come. And that allows us to date them. And what I showed essentially is that the last mandala, the 10th mandala, not because it's the 10th and the last, is around 6th millennium BC, same time as the Mahabharata. The 10th mandala of Rigveda has the names of Shantanu and Devapi. Now, everyone knows who Shantanu is, father of Bhishma. Okay? Of course, Rama's name is there, Rama, Prithu, Vena, it's there in the 10th mandala. But then you go backwards, and what we definitely know today is that some of the oldest portions of Rigveda, like 6 mandala, 6, 3, 4, 7, 2, they are definitely, or the portions of those mandalas are definitely more than 24,000 years. I'm not saying in 24,000 years. Definitely more than 24,000 years. No question, no ifs, no buts. So if there's a second point you remember, besides not calling it mythology, is to say, somebody asked you now, if somebody would have asked you in general, how old is our Hindu civilization, Indian civilization, whatever you want to call it, what is the typical answer you would have given, or what is the typical answer you hear?
5,000.
Thank you very much. You made my day. Okay? Let's meet afterwards. Wonderful. That's what you hear. Go to Google, Wikipedia, type anything, 5,000 years. And we are so proud. I mean, why proud? That's a different story. But ask the question, okay, you read somewhere, based on what evidence? If you start looking for evidence, it's going to take you beyond this. And we don't know how far back. But we definitely know it's more than 22,000 BC, which is more than 24,000 years. Okay? So that's my work of, say, 25, 30 years. Okay? Yeah, question? Okay, okay, and we can take, there will be time for question answers, okay? Then what we can do after Mahabharata, there are enough of literature, so Brahmanas, Upanishads, okay, many of the Dharma Shastra literature, and Veda Jyotisha, so many, that they have these references, many times astronomy, many times geological references, hydrological references, references to rivers, drying up of rivers, that allows us to even, some people think, okay, so what happened after Mahabharata? Nothing in between? There's still so much stuff in between. But you're not going to find this on a Wikipedia, you're not going to find this on a TV, okay, until we make those documentaries and videos. So there's so much stuff going on after this, all the way to 2000 BC. Now there are some blank spots. I mean, we have to go with what evidence we have. We cannot make up evidence. Okay, there are other civilizations who make up evidence. I mean, that will be another talk. Okay, all right. And how is this based on? Based on 1,000+ different data points. Okay, empirical, objectively testable data points from 12+ disciplines of science. So astronomy, archaeology, hydrology, geology, genetics, anthropology, paleontology, paleobotany, I mean, just you go on and on. Seismology, oceanography, climatology, paleontology. Okay. All right. And then the European Enlightenment. So if you want to put a context to this, and that's very important for our today's talk, European Enlightenment, so suddenly something happened in Europe, suddenly people started making these wonderful discoveries and all that, Of course we know the Newton, Einstein and whatnot, but in every area. And that happened, so this is actually suggested to me by a British consultant. He said, now against this wonderful timeline, put this European Enlightenment. So people have a context, what happened. But everything came from the West, that's what we hear, right? That's what we hear. So, and there are specific years there. Now what I'm going to show you, the three case studies that I referred to. The first case study, one of the three case studies, I'm going to talk from this European Enlightenment time period, okay? So, we'll get there. The second one, I'm going to take it back to that Mahabharata times, so 7,500 years ago, okay? And the third case study, you can guess what that would be. We talked about it briefly, Kumbhakarna. I'm going to take it back to 14,000 years, okay? So the timing of Ramayana. Okay. This is our smallpox inoculation. If you get infected with it, it's a very deadly, used to be deadly, how many of you have seen growing up, there used to be a big, I wouldn't call it marketing, awareness campaign, in Marathi, Devi, they call it Devi. And it's like first time I am growing up and started reading, in Marathi it's used to written everywhere, Devicha rogi kalwa, rupaye hazar bakshis milwa. So if you come across somebody who is infected with this Devi, smallpox, please let us know and you'll get 1,000 rupees. So I said, that's a great thing, but what is this Devi? Where do I find this and who do I tell? Okay, just like this, I remember that, So very, very deadly, of course many of you would have had these shots, you would remember those. Okay. Now, the goddess, now this is how we separate that mythology and how we connect. So many things are given to us in a metaphorical form. If you take it literally, like a very dull student, it's going to confuse the hell out of you. Okay, so Shitala Devi, Shitala is a Devi associated with the smallpox. That's where that Devi comes from. There are many other Devis, goddesses, connected with specific diseases. If you read, I'm going to show you an interesting reference, how far back it goes. So this is from one Nirmalananda, white-bodied one, now pay attention there, mounted on an ass. Now that may look like a horse, but be it as it may, I did not draw it. Okay. In your two hands, a broom and a full pot. Okay, this is a translation of whatever is written in her praise in Sanskrit or other language. To mitigate fever, because you get fever in this box, you asperge from the full pot with the broom the water of immortality. Okay. Naked with a winnowing fan on the head, your body adorned with gold and many gems, three-eyed, you are the quencher of the fierce heat of pustules. So that's what happens in this disease. Shitala, I worship you. Okay, so this is a goddess kind of assigned to this smallpox. Now, when I was working on a Mahabharata, and you know the story of Krishna and Putana. Okay, and then you see like this big thing. Oh, okay, yeah, this is mythology. Think of the word. There is no word carelessly and casually used in the Arshakavya, Mahabharata, Ramayana. Putana. You know what a puta is? Pus. Okay, now it's a slightly different disease than this, we don't think so, but actually Mahabharata has a reference to it in a different form. That same Shitala, remember it, okay, so Mahabharata I'm saying from 55-61 BC, if you go to Vanaparva, there's a long description, I won't go take you into this, but specific point I'll say is Kashta, Daruna Rupena, Ghora Rupa Nishachari, those of you understand, try to see, a very scary feeling, when that happens. Pishachi, Daruna Kara, like coming at night, usually why coming at night? That's true for many. Like, when we get an infection, even a flu, usually like, I'm not feeling that well, you say, you go to bed, and when you wake up, you're saying, oh, I'm exhausted. Generally, it picks up during the night. So at night, Pishachi Daruna Tara Kathyate Shita Putana. Think of that connection with the Shitala and Shita Putana. Okay. Now, modern Western claims and smallpox inoculation. Yes. Okay, I'll send you the PowerPoint slide. How's that? The whole PowerPoint will do? Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, who else besides her taking notes? Thank you. So besides these two people, what's wrong with the rest of you? Okay? All right. Thank you. Okay, you're doing a great job. Now, if I tell you about the inoculation, vaccination, these are the words. What name comes to your mind? Like a science name, like the person who figured out this inoculation business. Louis Pasteur, close. That's not the correct answer, but you get 5 points. Curie, you get 5 points, not correct answer.
5 points.
Somebody else. Edward Jenner. Yeah? Edward Jenner is connected with this vaccination or that. And so I'm going to tell you the story that you will get on the Wikipedia first. Okay? Alright, so that's our time axis. 1739, Edward Jenner was born. The dates are important, guys, okay? 1739. In 1792, he became a doctor. So I wrote down Dr. Edward Jenner. Okay, medical doctor. Just after that, he started doing experiments with this. And he used the cow, because he saw those cow maidens, they tend not to get infected with this, and I won't go into that story, it's there on the Wikipedia. So he did cowpox experiments, and then he started giving it to others, right? Started practicing on that. This is the story that we know. In fact, there was a lot of there was a lot of resistance to what he did. I mean, does this really cure? I mean, there were many cartoons. Let me see. I think I tried to put it. I'll show you on the next page. Now, this is an observation that many people have made, including many British researchers in there, but of course many Indian researchers and others, Chinese and historians. There is a persistent pattern. This is the time of Enlightenment, European Enlightenment. Okay, that's why I'm saying. Persistent pattern in Britain's scientific, and when I say Britain, that's because I pulled a quote from somewhere, but it applies to Europe in general, Western Europe in general. A persistent pattern in Britain's scientific and industrial discoveries of the early 19th century, not related to just medicine, but metallurgy, just go anywhere. Once a milestone was reached, details of the steps leading to it were removed. Okay, all the past things. Eastern antecedents of China, India, Persia, Turkey, of scientific discoveries were ignored or belittled, and modern science was presented as a stand-alone without any prehistory. So go to Wikipedia and read what is said about Edward Jenner. Now I want to give you a different one. So this is the kind of cartoons that emerged after Edward Jenner came up with a cowpox. What you see there is he's giving this dose, but because he's giving a cow vaccination, that's the word, right? Baka, that's why vaccination word, because it's taken from a cow, from Latin, right? The cow is vaka. By the way, that also comes from Sanskrit, but I'll not go there today. If Rigveda, the wak, just like a gow, but wak is also the word for a cow, also for a prithvi. That's how the waka. So these cow-like creatures are coming from different parts of these bodies who get this inoculation. The Shitala that I told you just before, did you notice she has a broom in one hand and a pot of immortality? What is that referring to? I'll talk about that method, but not in a detail. So remember how you got your shot. It's like a needle that pinched you. Before that, they actually use like a broomstick, Banaras Brahmins and Vrindavan Brahmins, that they will go around India inoculating people. And it was like this. Somehow the incision was made and the culture was introduced, and then it festers, the people go through some fever, and now they are immunized. So it is that Shitala is representing this needle in one hand and the culture to be given in the other hand. Okay? All right. Now let's look at a timeline of traceable history of smallpox inoculation. So back to this, 1739, Edward Jenner is born. And if you go ask Western, all of us, oh yeah, Edward Jenner. Now, yeah, you said Louis Pasteur, I typically get that, but Edward Jenner. Now, before 1739, see, this is the time frame that I just showed you. There is a documented evidence. Now, I'm not saying therefore 1500 it started, but there is a documented evidence that can go back as far as 15th century in India. That talks about these Banaras Brahmins going from village to village, and when the season comes, going all the way to Bengal and doing this inoculation. Okay, they did not use cow-based inoculation, like a literally human culture. again, just to manage the time, I'm not going to go into details, but it's amazing. Many families, they kept this culture on a thread. So like say grandpa has this, what you call smallpox. So they will take some culture like on the thread, and there are ways of preserving it, and they keep it. So when the next time they hear of epidemic, they take out that thread, and even the families could do it. They take the sample from it and inoculate everyone in the family. Like there were threads kept in the family because, like, you know, the genetically also it could be very potent, you know, the similar creature that is being inoculated, you know, the genetically one. And there were many other methods, and there were different methods, improvised methods. So we have a documented evidence. Now what happened is, when this knowledge through Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, it kind of went to Europe, okay, Eastern method. The Chinese had a method of sniffing it, you know, so this culture, they will sniff it. And when the Turkish guys, the Ottoman Empire tried it, it did not work successfully, but the Indian method did, even to Ottomans, okay. So that was there. Now what happened is, now I want you to just pay attention. While India is doing inoculation, in Europe itself, when smallpox or similar disease happen, but smallpox, stick to that, they treated that as some kind of inflammation of the skin and nothing beyond. And therefore, whatever they applied was a mistreatment, and people essentially died. Okay? Yes?
How did smallpox come to your skin?
How does, because it goes inside, and then it shows out, erupts on the skin, like the picture that you saw. And people can, it's a very serious thing, people can lose their eyesight, totally the face gets disfigured, but we don't have to worry that anymore. Just no worries, it's no longer there, you know, they have just put some culture somewhere in a safe place, you know, doesn't get out of the bottle. Yeah?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, great question, guys. Okay, and so they did a mistreatment. To cure that problem, this is 1731, the British are already in India. Dr. Robert Colt, he saw this method in India. He wrote to another Dr. Oliver Colt in England saying, guys, we are doing this in the wrong way, look at this. And no attention was paid. I mean, Oliver Colt might have, but other people did not listen. What was the problem? An extreme racial attitude. Okay, the brown skinned people cannot teach us anything. Okay, that was the thing. In fact, you know, some people who were using it, do you know who was using it? The extremely rich, the royalties were using it, because they say, oh, if I die, it doesn't matter, the brown guy's method or so, I cannot enjoy this. So they were ready to do it, and extremely poor people, they had no resources and they were willing to do it too. But the middle class, so-called the intellectual middle class of Europe, was against it. Okay, so these people were making attempts, the medical men were making attempts, understand this. There was another attempt, Dr. Holwell, he was also working in India, a British person, and he wrote an extremely long paper, that's 1767. This paper exists, by the way. Whatever I'm showing here, not showing the references, you can find those in a Wikipedia, like not Wikipedia, Google search and journals. He wrote an extremely detailed method, and something very interesting. How many of you have heard Six Sigma as a word, like a defect rate, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know, that's fine. He said, the credit goes to the Indian method of inoculation. Not a single individual of our race, by our race he means British race, those who are working in India, is lost to smallpox inoculation, and it is because of the efficacy of Indian method. I mean, he's writing in that article, okay? While that is happening, nobody is paying attention, okay? Now something else. Once Edward Jenner came up with this cowpox vaccination, within 4 to 6 years, you know what they did? 1802, in India, the Bengal, they were there, right? British were there in Bengal at that time. The Indian method, the traditional Indian method of inoculation was banned wherever British had influence in India. Because now what?
You want to sell?
Yeah, don't drink limbu sharbat, you know, now drink Coca-Cola, that kind of thing. Yeah, just take this. Indian method was banned in Bengal. And interestingly, the denial of that Indian origin of inoculation continues down to our times. I have papers from 1982, even very recent one I just ran into 2012. And very says that's nonsense, Indians cannot do it. Even they are writing in 2012. In spite of all this evidence. Okay? So that's my case number 1. Case number 2, Sushruta surgery and rhinoplasty. This one I'm going to go very fast through this, and it's for a reason. How many of you have, before coming here, happened to see my YouTube videos anywhere? Huh? Okay, so few. Those others who have not, just go there. This is a homework. You're taking notes? There is a homework, okay? So when you go there, go to YouTube, you take permission from your parents, okay? Type my name, and it's going to show you Sushruta or something like this, Nilesh. Please watch that video. So I'm going to go fast through this because I've spent 20 minutes there. 1794, go back again, that European Enlightenment period. This person, Tipu Sultan War, but I will not talk much about the Tipu. I did that the other day and they went on a tangent. They were interested in Tipu and not this, okay? So in the war, this person lost his nose. I mean, his nose was deliberately cut and a left arm. The person named Kawashji, the picture that you see. And two British men, and that's how we know it. They are, British men are amazing, I mean, British people are amazing chronicle writers. They will take notes of things. They know more about Mumbai of 17th century than we do, or 18th century and 19th century and so on. So this person, the two British medical men, saw an operation being performed on the nose, this rhinoplasty. The word did not exist then. On the streets of Pune by a local potter. And you will see this tradition. The surgeons in India were coming from a barber. Those were barbers. But same thing in Europe also. Naturally, right? Makes sense. They have the right equipment, they know how to sharpen them and so on. So, right? Okay. So an article came in Gentleman's Magazine. This was a big deal, like initially the magazines were coming out. And what that described is this method being performed and successfully done. Okay. That made, somebody wrote it. This is a magazine in England. So somebody wrote about it and it made a big sensation. The reason was European medical men, doctors, whoever, were performing these operations, even the nose operations, but they were not successful. Or they were not as successful as what this was. Huge difference. And this was a big news. Many people started studying this. There was a wonderful person named Carpio, a British man. And you know, he got so much interested. He was a medical man. And he started writing books about it. He drew the diagrams. So what this potter in Pune had done is he has taken a skin patch like that was known as an Indian patch afterwards, or flap. And so this guy has lost the nose. So he put a wax mold, this potter, and then he took the skin and turned it around, so to say, and put it on the top of it, then the herbs and balms and oils and all this, so that no infection. And in 2 weeks it was all good. And of course, it's not a real nose, but it's a functional nose, you know, for the appearance and looks. It's very interesting. He did not cut the skin completely. That's the improvement. I mean, improvement from the European point of view. He did not cut the skin completely. It was still there. So it's a alive tissue. So it's now the tissue, alive tissue on the top of it. Okay. And then somebody from Germany translated that to Carpio's work, and he first time coined the term Rhinoplastic. That's what we hear. But everyone is referring to Indian flag. They did very detailed drawing, you know. Now, while some people are doing this, many other people are into the same racial business. The Indians cannot do it. They are not trusting this information. They are doubting it heavily, okay? Plastic, like think of the word churjari, like in Marathi chirne, you know, in cutting, like you say cut, and you know, cut, kritika, the nakshatra kritika is a cut because, you know, the celestial equator and ecliptic, it cuts, that's why kritika, okay? So that churjari become a surgery, okay? And something interesting in, what is that, 1890, one Sir Bauer, he was sent on a secret mission on the China-Russia border. He found one document there, he purchased it, he couldn't understand what it is, but he couldn't decipher, so he sent it to Asiatic Society Bengal to decipher it. And one amazing researcher, Rudolf Hundley, he almost did a magical job and translated it. You know, it was just to know what it was. The actual document was in Sanskrit. The language is Sanskrit. But it was written in a Gupta Brahmi script. And Hundley is a British guy. So just try to imagine how much Vyapti Jnana, the contextual knowledge you need to know to figure this out. Just one simple case of it, okay? And again, so he has to know Sanskrit. He has to know all this background, you know, try to make this connection, which language it would be. And what was amazing about that is that particular document described the medicinal sciences of India, okay? And until then they are doubting it, although it just came, they said, okay, this guy claims it, Indian flap, but is it really true, you know? So that particular document had these many names: Atreya, Harita, Parashara, Bhela, Garga, Sushruta, and so on. And number of you may know this, like the Charaka Samhita. We have a Bhela Samhita even now, Harita Samhita, and of course Sushruta Samhita. So that suddenly created a second wave of excitement in Europe. So maybe this is true, because now the European found a document in China-Russia border that happens to have these names. You follow what I'm saying? So I'm going to bring this together. So this is from Sushruta Samhita, by the way. That particular reference, Vishleshitaya Stvatanasikaya. Those you know what to say. Vakshami Sandana Vidim Yathavat Nasa Pramanam Prithiviruhanam Patram Gruhitva Tvalambitasya. Now you say, okay, this is some Sanskrit worship song. No. Praise of Indra. No. This is describing exactly where to cut, how to take the flap, which oils to put, and how to do it, and do this. Something very interesting. In this method, this is from Sushruta Samhita. Actually, I mean, I'm not going to go through the translation or anything. The translation exists in English, you can see that. So that was the Sushruta or whoever has described this thing as taking a flap from the cheek and turning it to the nose. The potter went a couple of steps ahead. The point I want to say is that as far as the Indian civilization is concerned, or if you want to call the dharma, Sanatana Vedic dharma, Hindu dharma, you know, Yaskacharya has defined Sanatano as what? Sanatano Nitya Nutana. Sanatana is one that refreshes itself all the time. Okay, and I know there are few Marathi people in the audience. So Dhaneshwar says that in the Dhaneshwari, you know, and the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, the Shiva and Parvati are doing this. Devi jaise ka swarupa tujhe, taise he nitya nutana dekhi jai Gita tattva. When Parvati asked Shiva, what is the essence of Gita? He says, you know, jaise ka swarupa tujhe, just like your beautiful nature changes every day. You know, he's doing 2 in 1. Taise he nitya nutana dekhi jai Gita tattva. That is how it's a refreshing thing. Why you can read Gita today and still get more? Because it has this ability to give you a refresh thought appropriate for your time. Now, this is 1890. I told you about 1790 when the original flap came. British Medical Journal, they are publishing this thing. This is 1895. Now the Bauer manuscript comes out. Hunley starts translating Sushruta Samhita. Okay, the slowly portions are coming out. And look what the British Medical Journal has to write. When the Bauer manuscript was translated and Sushruta Samhita is coming out, they say to criticize the subject matter of this work, meaning Bauer manuscript, but also Sushruta Samhita, in detail would be labor wasted. Its interest is rather antiquarian, like, oh, we have something from old times, very interesting, put it in a museum, than scientific. Why? Because only Western Europe knows science. That is their belief. But a collection of complex farragos, because Sushruta Samhita has a lot more stuff, medicinal herbs and combination. Farragos prescribed according to a fanciful and erroneous pathology. Why fanciful and erroneous? Because they did not understand it. If we read our national narratives and if we don't understand it, we take it literally, then we say that they are fanciful, they are embellished, they are exaggeration. Fanciful and erroneous pathology is practically useless. So in one hand, they are using it, the knowledge. In the other hand, they are discrediting the people who gave them that. Okay. On the other hand, of course, there were some serious, sincere fellows like Carpio, I said. They say, let me do the validation. He sent his feelers in India saying, hey, is this true? Is this claim true? This is 100 years after they are using it. You know, they're calling it Indian flap. And he asked the folks, you know, European officers, British officers in India, and just a couple of references, but there are many. So he asked Charles Mallet, Sir Charles Mallet, and he confirmed that this method is indeed been common operation in India, from time immemorial. Okay, and then another person, Mr. Lucas, he also English surgeon who was working in India. He said yes, that he has successfully done the operation, and he had admitted he copied it from the Hindu practitioners. Other people have very comfortable saying Hindu. We have the one, kind of, yeah. No. We hesitate, right? For no reason. So Sushruta has a lot more. I'm going to skip through this beyond this flap that I just mentioned. Okay, now quickly on the time of Sushruta, if you go to Wikipedia again, You just type it or anywhere, Google, you're going to get 600 BCE. Again, I'm repeating my lecture that I gave. So 600 BCE, and you know, I mean, if you don't have this context, that Vyaptijna, you say 600 BCE, wow! It's a very useless comment. What do you mean 600 BCE, wow? I mean, why are you surprised? I mean, you think it's too recent or too old? Okay, recently Columbia University just kind of came up with this and said, oh yeah, so actually the British Indians had figured this out in 600 BCE. And another Indic researcher, if you are on the Twitter and you know, whatever, you will see that. He said, oh, that's great, now Columbia is accepting that it's a 600 BCE. And I said, nonsense. I mean, are you such fools? Columbia is not accepting. Columbia is saying only it is 600 BC, guys. Now we are telling you, we are dictating, now just stick with it. Don't ask questions, don't change that date. I'm going to show you how far old that is. It's not 600 BC, okay? I will go quickly because I have given the presentation. What I have shown is that Hunley, based on a very erroneous method, had come up with a 500 CE and 500 BCE, one for the text and one for the person. If Hunley has to use the same erroneous methodology, but the new knowledge that we know, we have to go back to at least 3000 BC. I'm just skipping because I have said that in other talk, okay? At least 3000 BC. If you look at the Sushruta Samhita itself, there are references and you can astronomically connect those. It takes you to 3000 BC, it takes you to, these are the references, I'll not go through them, I'll go fast. It takes you to 3000 BC, it takes you to 4000 BC. Okay, and these are approximate estimates. Usually they have an error of plus minus 1000 here, plus minus 2000. So therefore I have written possibly from 5000 BC to 2000 BC. Everyone follows? Sometimes the references you can be pinpointing it. Okay, and one more. Now this is specifically my work. Okay, so what I did is we talked about those triangulation and quadrangulation. So Sushruta Samhita, it talks about Sushruta learned it from a person named Divodas. Okay, and we have evidence to show that Divodas more than likely was his father. Divodas was a medical man in Kashi, Varanasi. He had many other students, but Sushruta was one of his students. Okay, now that I'm saying from a Sushruta Samhita, possibly 5000 to 2000 BCE. Now if you go to Garuda Puran, we don't know exactly the timing of Garuda Puran, but what is interesting and very useful is this. In Garuda Puran, in the medical context, the Vaidya Dhanvantari context, Divodas is mentioned and Sushruta by name is not mentioned, but the word used is Divodas Atmaja. Like, so Atmaja means of course son, someone very close, affectionate, and so on like this. What is interesting, how Garuda Puran helped me is this. It mentioned Divodas Atmaja, but it also mentions the genealogy, many other people in that genealogy. For example, like Vishwamitra, Devarata, Madhuchanda. So there are many Vishwamitras, but definitely one Vishwamitra is part of this line. Why that is important? Because if you go to Mahabharata, which I said is like from 6 millennium BC, more than 7500 years ago, there is a genealogy into the Anushasan Parva. Okay, that has, you know, the overlapping area that has Vishwamitra, Madhuchanda, Devarata. It also has Sushruta into that line. Okay, so you understand how we are logically drawing that now? So definitely Sushruta was known to Mahabharata. Now we don't know if he was a contemporary of Mahabharata or before Mahabharata. So Sushruta, that Wikipedia or Columbia wants to claim and makes us happy at 600 BCE, is actually at least 6000 BCE. They forgot the zero. Okay, or longer. Okay, quickly the third one, and we'll get into question answer. Kumbhakarna. Kumbhakarna, what do you know? Just a couple of things. Sleepy head, right? Sleeping for a long time. How long?
6 months.
6 months. Okay, yeah. So this is good. Okay. Anything else you know about Kumbhakarna? So sleepy is one. What?
He eats a lot.
He eats a lot. He eats a lot. Drinks a lot. What else?
Big size.
Big size. Very good. He was also brave, and you may just keep on adding this. In fact, when I started working on this, I won't tell you the story. Long story. That's a long story. In 2008, I was in Atlanta. So some fascinating things happened. I was doing a sleep research, and so when I said, okay, this may apply to Kumbhakarna, that KLS may apply to Kumbhakarna. And KLS has many other things than what you just told, like he eats a lot and sleeps a lot, right? So I said, before even I look at Valmiki Ramayana for references, I did a survey of like 15-20 people, like mostly Indians, because they have to know Kumbhakarna, right? I said, what do you know of Kumbhakarna? Just like I asked you. And I asked many others, did not tell them why I'm asking, and I just wrote it down. And then there are many things I'm going to show you in a KLS, Kleine-Levine syndrome, that you may not necessarily know, but they are there for Kleine-Levine syndrome. I said, if Kumbhakarna's case is KLS, obviously the two things we know. I'm going to show you that. But there are others. Do I find the evidence for that? And I'm going to quickly walk you through that evidence. Okay? Quickly, people sleep for long hours, 11 hours. So when we say they are sleeping all the time, what it means is they definitely get up for eating. They definitely go to the evacuation and all that. That is done. But otherwise, they just go and sleep. If you go to YouTube, there are documentaries. You'll see, young girl going through that and sleeping for 6 weeks and whatnot, Okay. Right now, in our times. The comparison, so I just created like a theory. Remember that triangle I said. So okay, if this is true, so what does my theory says? Kumbhakarna appears to have KLS syndrome. That is my theory. So I'm looking for evidence there. Then I want to objectively test and infer. What is the evidence I'm looking for? All the symptoms of Kleine-Levine syndrome. Now I'm going for objective evidence. I'm reading Valmiki Ramayana to see if those descriptions are also there for Kumbhakarna. You follow what I'm saying? Then I can say, based on that, it appears Kumbhakarna had a KLS syndrome. Okay, this is a quick chart. I'm going to go a bit fast so that I leave you time for a question answer. Hypersomnia, excessive sleepiness, that's a KLS. The first, that's how it's diagnosed. These two things must be there. Okay, so that's not a surprise. Excessive sleepiness and excellent match with Kumbhakarna. Would you agree? The descriptions that we know. Yes? Any doubt? No. The second one, hyperphagia. If you remember the description, once he wakes up, like there are all this food in front of him. And if you remember, those of you who read the story, he finishes that. Then he says, why have you woken me up? He's confused here, cognitive disturbance and all of this. And then they say, okay, let me go to the battlefield. He says, hold on, man. First go see Ravan. Okay, so he refreshes himself. So just he goes and takes a shower and he says, I'm hungry. He has eaten all this stuff, and those people who are taking care of him, they know it. Even he just comes from the shower and they have made the food ready again. So that is that hyperphagia. Okay. Now you may not have read about hypersexuality or even irritability or episode duration and any of this. Episode duration but hypersexuality, 50% of those patients show this. And if you read Valmiki Ramayana, which I did not know when I came across this, excellent match. Like for example, the word that Ravana uses to describe his condition, he uses the words such as Kamo Pahata Chetana or Gramya Sukha. He's busy, he's just entangled in Gramya Sukha. And then you read his descriptions of growing up, like he used to steal the wives of the sages and wives of other people, and that's why somebody said we need to do something. Irritability, that's there. Not very easy to detect. Episode duration. In 2009, when I did this, I found a paper. All the sleep research centers around the world, like Stanford is one, Johns Hopkins, France, and few other places. I wrote to each of those researchers, got this information. And I could find that the episode duration was as long as 3 months, but not more than that. Now I said, if I go with this story right now saying, but Indians immediately will say, but hey, Kumbhakarna was a 6 months, this is only 3 months, So I waited. Although I had it, I waited. I said, if the 3 months showed up, if you are patient enough, the 6 months will come. I waited until 2015, and that paper was same group of researchers. Now they have cases reporting up to 12 months. I said, now I can go out. So I wrote a small note in some place, Kumbhakarna and Kleine-Levine syndrome. Okay, so that matches. Interval between episodes 0 to 72 hours. Now, what have you heard? Like Kumbhakarna used to sleep for 6 months, but how long he used to be awake? There are multiple versions. One is like he used to be awake for 1 day. It is there in Valmiki Ramayana. Other place he used to be awake for 1 month. Okay, and there is a reason for it. In fact, 6 months is also not fixed. In Valmiki Ramayana, it is said Kumbhakarna sometime, Ravan says that, another person says that, sleeps for 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 months. These are the descriptions in Valmiki Ramayana. I am not making them up. And we have evidence to show that sometime he just woke up for 1 day, stayed awake. Other times for a longer time, sometimes for a few days. We have the evidence. Okay, so that matches. Behavior when not in KLS, extremely normal. These KLS patients are extremely normal when they are not into that episode of sleeping. Kumbhakarna had an extremely normal life otherwise. He was married, he had 2 kids who fought bravely in the war and died. Okay, he was helping Ravana go around, conquer other people, you know, fight wars and so on and so forth. He was very, if you read Kumbhakarna's advice to Kumbhakarna's discussion with Ravana before he goes to the battlefield, he's an amazing intelligent person who understands strategy, who understands statecraft, you know, all the rules. I mean, it's a very, very intelligent person. Onset of KLS, we have evidence to show that that sort of matches. Causes of KLS, the last two, quickly, important. What do we know today? There are multiple explanations, but no multiple conjectures, multiple guesses, but no satisfactory explanation. Okay, that is the state today, the second column. What does Valmiki Ramayana has to say? Valmiki Ramayana has three different, conflicting, contradictory explanations as to how Kumbhakarna got into this particular situation. They are not calling it KLS, by the way. Okay, Kleine-Levine are from last 100 years. Okay, but three different contradictory, mutually contradictory, conflicting stories. What is a lesson here? If you hear something conflicting, contradictory theories to solve a specific problem, what does that tell you? Basically, we are clueless. We don't know exactly why it happened. That's when these different explanations pop up, right? So in our times we say, well, that's the explanation, that's the explanation. In ancient narratives, they said, this is how it happened. This is how it happened. But then there are three different versions in the exactly same book. And the person documenting it have no problem writing it. Well, we don't have that problem even now. So just as a comparison, the last one, KLS management, I'll come back to that in a minute. But just to give you a metaphor, you know, these are the different interpretations and different theories of quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics is very successful, we are using it, but there are like 14 to 17 different theories trying to explain what happens, the karya karana bhava, the causality, and why they are there, and why we haven't circled one, saying, oh, this one is it, because nobody knows. They're trying to come up with these different possible explanations. That is the same thing that is happening, just as a comparison. So for 1 second, going back to the last point. KLS management, because they try different drugs and all that, because it's also a business, you know, like if it can help and make some money. But modern recommendations, because there is no cure, at least known cure per se, is to essentially make a very comfortable situation for that patient. Please watch YouTube documentaries on KLS, okay? Or Wikipedia, whatever. Comfortable situation, make it very pleasant because they feel irritable because of this, okay? Keep the food ready and so on and so forth. Those are the recommendations. You can go to KLS page and read that. That is exactly what Ravan did to Kumbhakarna. Again, I will encourage all of you to go and read all the descriptions of Kumbhakarna from Valmiki Ramayana. It was the guha that is described, the palace, you know, it was an underground palace for a reason, so that the sun doesn't bother him, the sunlight doesn't bother him. Okay, it was air conditioned. We don't know how they did it, but it was air conditioned. The pleasant perfumes and all those were circulated so that he's not irritable. And as soon as he's ready to wake up, the food is ready. The drink is ready, the food is ready, and so on. All right. Thank you. So we have to stop at what, 11:45, right?
Yeah.
So we have like 30 minutes. So when you ask question, if you can just please stick to just the question, what, when, why, how, where, that would be good. Okay, no questions? I'm going to go back to that, the framework slide. Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand. Yeah, just one second. Okay.
So what was the observation on the size of? He was very big and everything.
Right. So because it's a Arsha, Ramayana Mahabharata is a Arsha Kavya. Okay. So it's a history, okay, written in a form of a poetry. So that's easy to remember, easy to communicate, and so on. So, it doesn't even have to be poetry, but I'll just explain the poetry first. So embellishments are natural. Like you are describing a lady, immediately the all beautiful descriptions will come, like a face like a full moon, and so on and so forth. Okay. Think of the movies that we see, like wartime movies, like Patton or something like this. Of course, it was a very brave thing, but many times now we get to see the movie, and then what was the actual versus what they depicted, and so on. So there is a gap. But what happens is, you have to use these devices to make it memorable so that people remember. John Steinbeck, everyone knows the name? Okay, Grapes of Wrath and Mice and Men and no? No. Okay. American author, famous American author, right? With many award-winning and all. So what he says, you remember a story. Who wants to remember other person's story? Quick something to explain. When you look at a photograph, a group photograph, where you are also in it, where do you look first? At your photograph, right? Then how do you look? True? Yeah. So people want to remember the story which is their story, not other people's story. People want to remember the things that are familiar. Anything that is unfamiliar, anything that is complicated gets forgotten. Okay. So what happens? To make it familiar, make it something that can be easily remembered, you make it, you sometimes embellish. So Kumbhakarna was 15 feet. So what? 15 feet? So you tend to remember that. Okay, that exaggerated thing. So some of the exaggerated things are like that. It's a metaphor, simile, comparison, right? That's why I said he runs. He runs like a tiger is a simile. He is a tiger is a metaphor. You see the difference between that? He runs like a tiger is a simile. It's a comparison. He is a tiger, meaning he runs so fast that he is a tiger or a cheetah or whatever you want to call it. But somebody says, oh, so how was cheetah talking to human beings? Sometimes it could be like that. So that's why you see the exaggerated description of Kumbhakarna, but everywhere else. I would say, just from my 20 plus years of research, it is a good idea when you see something exaggerated, as a first gut reaction, I mean if you want to do this, to think that it is not an exaggeration. Let me find out if this is true. And I would say my experience, just personal experience, Pratyaksha, many times, at least 99% of the time, there is a very good explanation what it is, rather than thinking it's exaggeration. Okay, now I didn't talk about the Arundhati Vasishtha, but there are 800 plus astronomy observations that I have studied. And many of those, not all, but many of those are astronomers.